For 5 centuries, the story of the Amazon has been told the same way. A vast, untouched wilderness, a green desert where only scattered nomadic tribes survived beneath the canopy. A place where large-scale civilization was impossible. That story is wrong, and the evidence that destroyed it came not from historians or archaeologists alone, but from DNA, satellite imagery, and the soil itself. Every European map told the same lie. The interior of South America was drawn as a blank, as if no one had ever lived there. The descendants of the people who survived carry both the memory and the genetic scars of a catastrophe that colonial history never fully recorded. This is Terra Preta, Black Earth. It is the fingerprint of millions of people who lived, farmed, and died in the Amazon long before Columbus was born. When European diseases swept through the Americas in the 16th century, they did not just kill millions of people. They erased the evidence that those people had ever existed. The jungle grew back over their cities, their roads, and their farms within a single generation. For centuries, outsiders looked at the result, a dense, seemingly pristine rainforest, and assumed it had always been this way. They were looking at a graveyard and calling it a garden. The Spanish chronicler Gaspar de Carvajal, who traveled with Orellana, described settlements so large and so close together that the expedition could not land for days. He wrote that the people were organized, armed, and numerous beyond counting. Carvajal's accounts were dismissed for centuries as fantasy. Scholars could not reconcile his descriptions with the sparse populations they found when they finally explored the region. European diseases killed an estimated 90 to 95% of the indigenous population within a century of contact. In the densely connected Amazon, the wave of death traveled faster than the Europeans themselves. The first Europeans to navigate the Amazon in 1542, the expedition of Francisco de Orellana, described something very different from wilderness. They reported dense populations lining the riverbanks, towns stretching for kilometers, roads connecting settlements deep into the interior. Later explorers found nothing. The populations were gone, and for the next 400 years, scholars dismissed Orellana's accounts as exaggeration or fantasy. The assumption became dogma. The Amazon soil was too poor for agriculture. The jungle was too hostile for permanent settlement. Large populations were impossible. The forest was, and always had been, empty. Then scientists started digging, and the soil told a different story. The charcoal in Terra Preta was not accidental. It was produced through low-temperature burning, a controlled process that converted organic waste into stable carbon. Modern experiments confirm what the ancient inhabitants discovered through centuries of practice. Terra Preta can increase crop yields by up to 300% compared to untreated Amazon soil. Terra Preta do Indio, Indian Black Earth, was first documented by European soil scientists in the 19th century. Patches of incredibly fertile dark soil scattered across the Amazon basin, in a region where the natural soil is acidic, nutrient-poor, and hostile to sustained agriculture. The Black Earth was different. It was rich in charcoal, organic matter, bone fragments, and broken pottery. It had been created deliberately by adding charcoal and biological waste to the soil over centuries. It was an engineered agricultural substrate, and it was everywhere. Soil surveys have estimated that Terra Preta covers roughly 154,000 square kilometers of the Amazon basin, over 3% of the total area. That is not the footprint of scattered nomadic tribes. That is the footprint of a civilization. In 2024, a team using airborne LiDAR, laser scanning that penetrates forest canopy, published results in the journal Science. They had scanned a fraction of the Amazon basin. What they found underneath the trees changed the numbers entirely. The bones from which the ancient DNA was extracted had been collected from sites across South America over decades. Many had sat in museum drawers for years before the technology existed to read their genetic code. LiDAR works by firing millions of laser pulses per second toward the ground. Most bounce off the canopy, but a fraction penetrate through gaps between leaves and reach the forest floor, revealing what lies hidden beneath. Between 10,000 and 23,000 large-scale pre-Columbian earthwork sites are predicted to remain hidden beneath the forest canopy. Sites that include fortified villages, ceremonial enclosures, raised agricultural platforms, and road networks. A 2018 study in Nature Communications by Jonas Gregorio de Souza and Josadi Arte identified 81 new archaeological sites in the upper Tapajós Basin alone. Extrapolating from their density, the southern Amazon rim may have supported between 500,000 and 1 million people, and that was just one region. The Amazon basin covers 6 million square kilometers. From the ground, these structures are almost invisible. A gentle rise in the terrain, a slightly different mix of tree species, easy to walk past without noticing. From above, with the canopy digitally stripped away, the structures emerge like a ghost city materializing from fog. Eduardo Neves, an archaeologist at the University of Sao Paulo, stated that the overall evidence supports previous estimates of 8 to 10 million people living in the Amazon before European contact. 8 to 10 million. In a place that textbooks said was empty. Then came the DNA, and it confirmed what the Earth and the satellites had suggested, but added a dimension no one anticipated. In 2016, researchers at the Australian Centre for Ancient DNA published a study analyzing mitochondrial DNA from nearly 100 pre-Columbian individuals across South America. The results were devastating. None of the mitochondrial lineages found in those ancient remains matched the lineages found in living indigenous populations today. The genetic lines had been severed. Entire maternal lineages, representing thousands of years of continuous ancestry, had simply vanished. Nearly 100 ancient individuals were sampled across South America, from the Andes to the coast to the interior. The pattern of genetic extinction was universal. The sophistication of Mirage ceramics rivals that of any pre-Columbian tradition in the Americas. Some pieces show influences connecting them to Andean and Caribbean cultures, evidence of long-distance trade. Lead author Bastian Lamas stated that the only scenario fitting the data was that founding populations became geographically isolated from one another early on, and a major portion of those populations went extinct following European contact. The immune gene data told an even starker story. A variant called HLA-DQ01, critical for the immune system's ability to distinguish healthy cells from pathogens, appeared in nearly 100% of ancient remains. In modern indigenous populations, it appears in only 36%. The implication is direct. European diseases did not just reduce the population. They selected against the very genetic variants that had protected those populations for millennia. The survivors carried different immune profiles than their ancestors. The immune system collapse was not random. It was selective. The variants that had served these populations for millennia were precisely the ones that left them most vulnerable to European pathogens. The gene variant that disappeared had been under positive selection for thousands of years. It was an advantage until smallpox turned it into a vulnerability. And there is a deeper genetic mystery in the Amazon, one that predates Columbus by thousands of years. In 2015, David Reich and Pontus Skoglund at Harvard published a finding that stunned population geneticists. Certain indigenous groups in the Amazon, the Surdo, the Carishiana, the Zavante, carried a genetic signal that linked them not to other Native Americans, but to indigenous Australasians, people from Australia, New Guinea, and the Andaman Islands. The Kasarabi sites had a hierarchical structure, central monumental sites connected to smaller satellite villages. This was urban planning at a regional scale. The causeways connecting settlements ran perfectly straight for kilometers through dense forest. Maintaining them required constant, organized labor. They called this mystery ancestor population U, from the Tupi word for ancestor. Upiku, Rati, and nobody knows who they were. No modern population matches them. They appear in the DNA of Amazonian peoples, and essentially nowhere else in the Americas. The genetic signal is small, 2 to 5%, but consistent and confined to specific Amazonian groups. No modern population anywhere in East Asia matches it. The source population has vanished, and it was in the Amazon, specifically on Mirage Island at the mouth of the Great River, that one of the most dramatic proofs of large-scale civilization had already been found decades earlier. Anna Roosevelt's 1990 re-excavation of the Mirage Mound complex suggested it had supported over 100,000 inhabitants. The areas where they lived still contain the most lush vegetation in the region. The pottery tradition at Mirage lasted over 1,000 years. The art was not primitive. It was one of the most sophisticated ceramic traditions anywhere in the pre-Columbian Americas. And the geoglyphs, over 400 geometric earthworks have been exposed by modern deforestation alone. Perfect circles, squares, and interconnected ditches, some over 300 meters in diameter, carved into the earth with the precision of engineered structures. The precision of the geoglyphs required surveying and planning on a scale comparable to contemporary European construction projects. The ditches are deep, uniform, and precisely aligned. This was not casual earth moving. This was infrastructure built to last. Every bone fragment from the Amazon that yields usable DNA is precious. The tropical climate destroys genetic material faster than almost any other environment on Earth. Modern ecologists estimate that at least 10 to 12% of the Amazon's forests are anthropogenic, shaped by human management rather than purely natural processes. Tree ring analysis and pollen records from lake sediments show that forest regrowth accelerated dramatically around 1500 CE. Exactly when the population collapse began. These were not random marks. They were ceremonial enclosures, fortified settlements, and agricultural management systems. They represent organized, collective labor on a scale that requires thousands of coordinated workers. And the people who built them did not just disappear quietly. The DNA record shows what happened. Ancient mitochondrial lineages that had persisted for 9,000 years were wiped from the genetic record within decades of European contact. The forest grew back, it always does. Within one generation, the roads were gone. Within 2, the villages were invisible. Within 3, the clearings had become indistinguishable from primary forest. And the Europeans who arrived afterward looked at the result, a vast, dense, seemingly untouched jungle, and wrote the story that would persist for 4 centuries. The Amazon was always empty. The indigenous people were always few. Civilization was always impossible here. Every one of those assumptions has now been disproven by soil, by satellites, by laser, and by DNA. In 2022, researchers using LiDAR in the Bolivian Amazon revealed the Kasarabi culture settlements, including 2 monumental sites with conical pyramids rising over 20 meters above the surrounding landscape. These were not villages. These were urban centers with engineered water management systems and connecting roadways. The Kasarabi sites included sophisticated water management, canals, reservoirs, and raised agricultural fields designed to control seasonal flooding. Modern archaeologists have reconstructed these raised field systems and found them remarkably productive, converting seasonal wetlands into year-round agricultural platforms. The people who built these structures managed the forest itself. High concentrations of domesticated tree species, cacao, Brazil nut, breadnut, rubber cluster around every earthwork site. These were not clear-cuts, they were managed forests. The pre-Columbian Amazon was not wilderness. It was a garden the size of Western Europe, tended by millions of people whose agricultural system was so effective that its products, the enriched soil, the selected tree species, survive to this day. Terra preta is still the most fertile soil in the Amazon. Farmers today seek it out specifically. It regenerates itself. The charcoal and microbial community in the soil continues to sequester nutrients centuries after the people who created it died. Local farmers have known about terra preta for generations. They call it the gift of the old people, a legacy from ancestors they never met. And the DNA evidence suggests something even more profound. about what was lost. The 2016 study found that ancient populations became isolated early, within a few thousand years of first arriving in South America. Each region developed its own distinct genetic lineages over 9,000 years of separation. When European diseases arrived, they did not destroy one population. They destroyed dozens of genetically distinct populations simultaneously. Each lineage that vanished represented thousands of years of unique evolutionary history. Adaptation to specific environments, resistance to specific local pathogens, dietary specializations. Somewhere beneath this canopy are the remains of 10,000 settlements that have never been mapped, and within those settlements are bones that carry the genetic record of populations the world forgot. Increasingly, the archaeologists leading this work are indigenous themselves, descendants of the civilization they are uncovering. They are not discovering someone else's history. They are recovering their own. The genetic diversity that existed in the pre-Columbian Amazon was greater than the diversity of all modern indigenous populations in the Americas combined, and most of it is gone. And the population Y signal? The mysterious Australasian DNA found only in Amazonian groups adds an even deeper layer. It suggests that the Amazon was not just populated, it was populated by people whose origins are older and stranger than anyone previously imagined. The Suru, the Kurishana, the Xavante, these living peoples carry in their DNA the remnant of a population that may have entered the Americas by an entirely different route than the ancestors of other Native Americans. A route that connected South America to Australasia. The population Y signal is not noise. It has been replicated across multiple studies using different methodologies. It is real, it is ancient, and it is concentrated in the Amazon. Skoglund told reporters they had checked every possible explanation: European contact, African admixture, Polynesian voyagers, and none of them fit. The signal is too old, too specific, and too geographically concentrated. No ancient DNA from a population Y individual has been found. The best candidates are ancient skeletons from Brazil, whose cranial morphology some researchers describe as having Australasian features. The rivers that carried Orellana's expedition in 1542 still flow through the same forests. The settlements he described are gone, but the soil they created and the trees they planted remain. The Amazon holds the answer, but the Amazon also makes ancient DNA recovery brutally difficult. The heat, the humidity, the acidic soil, all of it degrades DNA faster than almost any other environment on Earth. The Amazon before Columbus was not empty. It was one of the most densely managed landscapes on the planet, shaped by millions of people using techniques modern science is only beginning to understand. Their agricultural system, based on terra preta, agroforestry, and polyculture, was more sustainable than anything Europeans brought to replace it. The soil they created 2,000 years ago is still the most productive in the region. And when they died, killed by diseases they had never encountered, carried by people they had never invited, the forest reclaimed everything. The roads, the villages, the gardens, even the memory. The people who made the terra preta understood something about soil chemistry that Western science did not formally describe until the 20th century. The Brazil nut groves that modern harvesters depend on were planted by people who died 500 years ago. The forest remembers its gardeners even when the history books do not. The story we told ourselves, that the Amazon was always wild, always empty, always beyond the reach of civilization, was not just wrong. It was the story the collapse itself created. The tools to reveal what lies beneath the canopy exist now. LiDAR, satellite imaging, ancient DNA extraction, soil geochemistry, each one peeling back a layer of the jungle's 500-year cover story. And every new scan, every new soil core, every new DNA extraction pushes the numbers higher. The Amazon was not home to 2 million people. It was home to 8 million, maybe 10, maybe more. The living descendants of the Amazon's ancient civilizations are reclaiming their history. The archaeological evidence gives them something the colonial narrative tried to erase: proof that their ancestors built a world. Drop a comment. Does knowing the Amazon was densely populated change how you think about the concept of wilderness? And what does it mean that a civilization of millions could vanish so completely that we forgot they existed? If you enjoy deep dives where DNA meets archaeology, subscribe. Because beneath every canopy, there is a story that history forgot, and the Amazon has only just begun to tell its.